Welcome to Evening Tea, a slow after bedtime space for women who are exploring motherhood differently. Here we talk about the things you whisper about with your closest friends, the tender, the intuitive, and sometimes controversial, from pregnancy, home birth to postpartum healing, vaccines, natural health, motherhood, parenting, identity, and everything in between. Nothing is off the table here. So pour yourself a cup of tea, take a deep breath, and settle in. I'm Chaya, and this is the conversation that you've been craving. Welcome back. I am so glad you're here. Tonight, I want to invite you to slow down, sit with us for a while, and just listen. This is the space to be curious, to hear stories, to hear experiences without any pressure or expectations. I am especially excited about this episode, this conversation, because it's deeply personal for me. I'm sitting down with Tania Zirulnik, the incredible midwife who cared for me during both of my pregnancies and home births. Tania was by my side in some of the most intimate, powerful, grounding moments of my life. And even though this episode is very much about home birth and birth in general, it's more about choice, autonomy, trust, and the strength that we don't often realize our bodies can hold. And when I think back on my births, one of the feelings that comes first is empowerment, calm, groundedness, a kind of centered confidence that I can make decisions for myself, that I could lead my care with guidance rather than clinical prescription. And that autonomy, that feeling, the ability to trust my body, to trust the process, to trust the people who I invited into my space is exactly where I want to explore tonight. I also want to gently challenge some of the stories that we hear over and over, that home birth is dangerous, that it can't be done safely, that women need to follow a standard path in order to be protected. There's so much more nuance, and I hope that this conversation gives the space for that. Pour your tea, settle in. Let's hear what it's really like when choice, support, and trust come together in a home birth. Tania, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to Evening Tea.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here with you. And I feel that, we could sit for hours to talk about all these topics. So we'll have to
Yeah,
we'll have to work hard to keep it short today.
exactly. Well, Tanya, I would love to hear a little bit about you personally, and kind of how you knew that midwifery was your path in life.
I actually didn't know for some time. But so I'm originally from Peru and I always liked caring for people. I always knew I was going to do something related to medicine. Like I was always obsessed with the human body and how it worked. And like if somebody got a cut, I wanted to be the one helping it, treat it and heal it. And so I was like, definitely that's going to be my path. And then by the time I finished high school, I actually didn't even know what a midwife was. I thought I was just going to go to medicine school. And I applied for medicine school and I didn't get in. And then I was like, I wonder, like, how much do I really feel I want to be a doctor? Am I that committed to it? Or maybe I should explore what other things within the field of medicine I can also maybe explore and maybe I like better. And thankfully, I knew actually someone who was a midwife. And I was like, okay, let's sit down now and explain to me what midwifery is all about. And I was a 17-year-old back then, not even, I think I was 16, right out of college, of high school, sorry. And, I was like, can you explain to me what a midwife does? And, you know, she basically, just put it down like we take care of low risk pregnancies. And in my mind was like, well, why would a pregnancy be high risk anyway? Right. Like it was just, again, I'm 16-year-old girl, like just thinking, okay, this is I like that. I like the idea of just looking at a pregnancy as something just so natural. And so I felt that, okay, they seems to be the right path for me. And, I applied, I got in, went to my first day of classes, never looked back, never regretted it. I knew that was the right path for me, and then years later, after I graduated and worked as a midwife for a short period of time in Lima, Peru, I felt that I wanted to see more because it was all hospital based. My training was all hospital based. So I felt that I didn't know what else I was looking for, but I felt that there was some other way I could provide midwifery care outside of a hospital. I didn't know much about home birth at that point. And then I came to New York and explored more and ended up meeting the home birth midwives of New York City. And one of them welcomed me to see see how it works here and do visits with her and assist her. And that's how I ended up where I am now.
Wow. Oh, I love that. I love how, like, the first day you said you just knew this was your calling. That's I love when that happens. It's so beautiful. I think a lot of people hear the word home birth and, like, immediately, like, tense up and get, like, scared, and I'd love to hear some misconceptions that you hear often, either from your own patients or from others online or in general.
I think when we talk about birth in general and safety, we first need to define what safety means for each person, right? Because we all have a different idea of what safety could mean, really. For some people, safety could be when it relates to pregnancy and birth, right? Safety could be I don't want to be in a place where I feel very vulnerable, where I feel that I have no voice. I don't want to be at a place where everybody's going to be doing a vaginal exam, or maybe I was traumatized at that place. I don't want to go back to that place because I feel safe. Maybe I don't want to work with that home birth midwife again because it wasn't a good experience, right? Like, or I want to make sure me and my baby are going to be okay and come out alive out of this process, right? So we can define safety from each individual's perspective and experiences. So I think every individual, first of all, if they're going to make a choice of where they want to have their baby, they first need to ask themselves, okay, what is the most important thing for me as to safety? And with their partner, have a close conversation of this is what's very important to me. This is what's the most important thing. Having a baby, I want it to be in a nice place. And for some people, could be the hospital. For some people, could be home, right? So I think that's number one. Number two, once we have been able to define safety and then, okay, that person chose to have a home birth, then we need to make sure we do adequate research as to, okay, who are the providers out there providing this care and maybe even what the statistics say. And when, sometimes we read studies and we also even need to know who made these studies and how they were made, because sometimes they lump all the home births in one study. Those that were planned, those that were unplanned, those that just had a birth keeper with them or an actually skilled professional with them, right? So we need to see, okay, what the data tells us, but the real true good research literature, right? Maybe even hear experiences from other people, because sometimes those are really valid. And then, once we say, okay, I see that home birth includes, someone who is professional, who has done this for many years, meet the person. And, I think sometimes I've had clients that come with their parents, especially the moms, and they're like, my mom is really nervous about it. And then they come and they meet me and they're like, first of all, the first thing they do is tell me their birth story, right? Because I feel people always have to share that first story. And then
Everyone.
everyone, right? And then they're like, I'm so glad to meet you. Oh my God. Because I think in their minds, they were expecting someone totally different, someone that just maybe barely knows the the pregnant person and just kind of like shows up empty handed at the birth. And then when they realize, actually, I went to college. I got a degree. I have experience. I've been doing this, and I have a plan for everything. For the most part. Then they realize, okay, so this is actually a well outlined line of work, right? And then we talk even at these visits about the misconceptions, because a lot of the I think the doubts people have about home birth is because of misconceptions. If a doctor tells you a home birth is not safe, ask the doctor, have you ever been at a home birth? You know, I cannot talk about I don't know, like carpentry if I've never worked in that field. I cannot talk about the work a neonatologist does if I have never worked in that field, right? So if you've never even been at home birth, I'm sorry, you can't give an opinion about it. You can suggest literature, but if you have never been at it, you can't really have a say. If somebody has a question about home birth, come ask the experts about it, which are home birth midwives. The truth is, it is in our best interest that everybody has a good experience and a good outcome for the birth. So nobody's going to lie about, what are the pros and the cons of a home birth, right? So that's number one. The second thing is, um, we want to make sure that certain ideas that are told, myths, like the big one is the biggest one is the cord around the neck, right? What if there is a cord around the neck? And my friend whose baby had a cord around the neck, they had to rush her to the OR, and thank goodness she was in a hospital. Well, we need to say this more often. 30% of babies are going to be born with a cord around the neck without any problems.
Wasn't Ari born with
That's
the cord around his neck?
Yeah, I think it was.
Yeah.
I've had somebody,
Yeah.
a baby with a cord around the neck 3 times. Like, it just
Oh my
happens
gosh.
very often.
Yeah.
Okay. And one, this is why we monitor the baby throughout the labor. Like, we actually bring tools to listen to the baby and make sure the baby's doing okay. I think a lot of people think if the cord is around the neck, is suffocating the baby, but that is not what's happening, because the baby is not breathing. So it's not like us adults that are not in the uterus. If somebody presses on our neck, then yes, it's going to suffocate us. That's not what happens with a baby. The only thing that can happen is if the cord is very tight around the neck, it would reduce blood supply to the baby, and we will see that through the heartbeat, right? Which is why we're constantly listening. And if it looks like the baby is not enjoying that contraction, that push down, because the cord is really getting compressed, then we go to the hospital. Like, we have time to do it. So that's really one of the biggest one. And I talked about that in many consults during many appointments as well. And then the other one is, when there are circumstances where somebody ends up in a C-section, and again, right, it's like, oh, thank goodness you were in the hospital. But what triggered that C-section? Maybe somebody was, without any medical reason, induced, and then she was on Pitocin, and then she was on her back, and then she got an epidural, and all these things add up, and the baby just responded to it and said, I don't like this, and the heartbeat starts dropping. And then it's like, oh, we need to rush to the hospital. Okay, well, maybe if we wouldn't have induced this person in the first place, if this person would have been on her back, she wouldn't have probably needed an epidural. Therefore, maybe this wouldn't have happened, right? So we also need to keep that in mind when we talk about, is home birth really safe or not? There are going to be inherent risks with a home birth. Yes, I'm not going to deny it, because if there is the one in a million, and we are far away from a hospital, yes, something can happen, but it's not the usual thing that we see. Most transfers when we go to the hospital are good transfers, and we make it to the hospital. The person still can have a vaginal birth. It's not a dramatic event where there's people dying or bleeding or things like that.
I think that really addressed a lot of misconceptions. I know, like, as you were telling about, like, the moms who come with their daughters to hear, I was thinking back to when my husband came and he had all the questions. And For people who've never been introduced to home birth as a safe option, they come with the questions and your midwife will answer every single one with care. They'll go in depth as much as you need. They'll answer the same questions again and again and again, in my experience. I am curious to hear from you. Is there a birth memory, either your own or a birth that you were at, that stays with you, that either touches you deeply or surprised you?
I think if I have to choose one, because there's been many that surprised me and, but I would say probably was the first home birth that I was at. And the reason for this is because, up until that point, I had done 150 hospitals for births. And even from the first hospital birth that I saw, it was like, I was like, oh, great. I saw birth, but it just felt a little natural. I even remember like my blood pressure, like I kind of actually felt a little lightheaded because I felt like, oh, there's a lot happening. That's not how I picture birth when it happened at the hospital. And then when I was invited to be at this home birth, assisting this home birth midwife here in New York, and I really just didn't know what to expect. I just went with my mind open and just ready to learn. And it was such a life changing experience because I remember it was like the winter time. It was in this beautiful apartment in Williamsburg with big windows and it was snowing, right? So just to add like all these like romantic things to the picture. And I walked in and this woman is in her pool and there's no lights on. There's just candles. It's kind of like the romantic births we probably see on social media, but it was my first time seeing these. And I was just so like, I felt like, do I need to say something? Do I need to do something? Like, I'm the super person, which I should be doing something, but I felt that there was nothing I needed to do. Her husband was with her in the pool. And, she just like started pushing slowly and quietly. And like the snow, it was like beautiful. The
That's so
snow just kept
beautiful.
falling. And then the baby came out in the water. There was not even the midwife there was saying like push, push, or nothing, right? Like nobody told her to push or when to push. And the baby came out. And I remember again, right after already having seen 150 births, I teared up because I was like, this is so beautiful. This is what I was looking to see, that very first birth I witnessed when I was a student midwife. And I also felt that that also was so meaningful to me because it helped me find myself. I was like, this is
Wow.
what I was looking for. This is what I needed to see to decide what line of work I'm going to continue with in midwifery. Like I knew the hospital was not for me. I just didn't know what other path I should take. And then I found myself and I was like, this is it.
That's so beautiful. Oh my gosh. That made my heart so happy. That's such a good entrance into home birth midwifery. I know from my experiences that you have a very good way of holding space for the mom or the family to make their own decisions while still guiding them. My question is, how do you hold space for two things to be true? For the family to be making their own decisions, the mom could be trusting her body while still guiding them in the right direction for safety, for progress.
That's a really good question. I think it all starts with the prenatal care because like you mentioned, right? Like I really give space to ask questions and re-ask them and I think it's so important to have these long conversations for people who are not familiar with prenatal visits with a home birth midwife. They last somewhere between an hour or maybe even two sometimes. And most of the visit is about talking, and answering questions. And what's your vision for the birth? What is your biggest wish for this birth? And for some people it can be like, I want my husband to catch the baby. I want my mom to cut the umbilical cord. But, sometimes it comes to more medical questions. And I always tell people, like, listen, this is your baby, it's your body. I can give you the pros and cons, but I cannot push you to make a decision um, that doesn't make you comfortable within the realms of safety, right? I think I tell people I'm always willing to meet them halfway. So if somebody comes and says, hey, I would like to not do any blood tests during my pregnancy. And I ask them why. Maybe they're really scared of syringes, needles. And I explain why it's important to know certain things. I would like to know if you're anemic. Yeah, but I take my vitamins and I know, well, we just want to make sure that they are actually getting absorbed well, that, you know, because if you are going into a birth that we expect it to be safe, you got to make sure that your entire health and well-being is there, right? So I explained to them why for me the blood checking it's really important. And I think, like, I don't try to force them. I think when I explain it to them in a nice way, they understand it. And I don't think after giving my explanation, anybody has been like, I still don't want to do it. Like, I think they get it. And I said, listen, I know you're scared of needles. So why don't you maybe lay down? If the partner of the mom is there, I said, okay, hold her hand. Let's talk about something different while I'm drawing your blood. And so, like, I also try to be really nice about it so that even though they're really, experiencing something that is not in their comfort zone, it still ends up being a good experience. Right. And I think that's one of the first passages to us developing a relationship of trust, because that is something very important. I cannot go all the way to attend somebody's birth if that person doesn't trust me or if I don't trust that person. Right. And when it comes to the glucose test, for example, right? Some people are like, but why I have to do it? I feel safe. Right? And then I explained to them, well, this is why. And listen, you don't have to drink the glucola that everybody hates and makes everybody nauseous. And there's different options that we can work with. I didn't know, right? So it's also being able to just be flexible and just really work with them in what makes the most sense to their lifestyle, to again, to what's in their comfort zone. I've even been in situations where they say to me, I don't want you to be in the room, I'm going to call you when the baby's coming. And I'm like, sure. Like, especially for people that have had more than one baby, like that's kind of like a common request, and I'm like, I'll be right out the door. You just tell me. And, most of them, once you've experienced it once, you can tell, like, you're like, okay, I'm ready to push. Like, oh, it's coming, right? Like, and so they say, okay, now you can come in, right? And everybody, we've never had any accidents. Everybody, like just, okay, the head is coming. Sometimes they're like already putting the hand there on the head as the head starts to crown. And I'm like, oh, I'm right here. You can even just catch your own baby. Because at the end of the day, I am there. I say we because I always come with my assistant. So I always kind of like, talk about us. But I am there not necessarily to catch the baby, but like to act if something is needed. Right. And it could just be like just to be there with that person, for that person to feel like, oh, I can just do it. And I know Tania is there if she needs to hold the baby, or maybe the shoulders are stuck, like anything like that. So that's what I'm there for. And most of the time I I I don't need to do much. I just, here, let me help you get in a better position so you can actually get your baby on the chest. And so I think that is what allows people, or that's what, I don't like to use the word allow because I'm not, it's not me who's permitting them anything. But I think that's what gives people their autonomy and makes them feel this was everything that happened was the way I wanted it to happen and I envisioned it. And I'm thankful that I was respectful. I was able to be respectful of that.
Oh, I
So
love that.
yeah.
I love, love, love that. And I want to talk about autonomy in a second, but as you were talking, I was thinking back to both of my births and just remembering like very specific moments where you were there for whatever I needed in whatever capacity I needed you. Bringing that into autonomy, it's something I'm so thankful for because for me, like both of my births, especially my first birth, being that it was my first time giving birth, taught me how to trust my intuition and taught me how to trust my body, taught me to listen to my body. And I want to hear from you. What does it look like when a person is able to fully trust their body through their birth?
I think trusting your body starts before the birth. And I think there's two main factors these days that affect how women are able or not to trust their bodies. And one is the medical system, and the other one is social media. Um, and the medical system has this approach that they don't trust that moms know what they're doing. That's just my theory. Like we need to be on top of you because you don't know what you're doing, right? You have to do this test, period. Right? You have to, without getting too deep into like vaccines, you have to give vaccines, otherwise you cannot be in my practice, right? Like all these things. And I think that really, for women, either becomes a fight or just becomes, when you're pregnant, you're in such a vulnerable spot that you're just like, okay, okay, whatever you say. And so you feel like you don't have a voice and you lose your autonomy. And then when it comes to social media, as many accounts can be all well intentioned and, providing information, but simple things like, this is how you should push your baby. Sorry, everybody pushes differently. And I can tell you 600 different ways people push their babies, right? Like there's not a one size fits all, right? This is your first pregnancy and you should be preparing, you should be already buying things for, like, well, no, I just don't want to. I personally didn't buy anything before my baby arrived, right? Like, and so it's like it just starts to make us feel like we need to have all these things or we need to do all these things. Otherwise, our body's not going to do it the way it's supposed to. And that's just not true. Right. So I think that just already takes the power away. And I always tell people, like, sometimes they ask all these questions, especially for after the baby, right? Like, or how would I know it's time to push? Or how would I even know I'm in labor? For the most part, I'm like, trust me, you're not gonna miss it.
Yeah, you're not going to miss it. You'll know.
But mostly like postpartum, when the baby's here, I always tell them, listen to your gut. Your instinct is never going to be wrong unless you have some kind of mental condition or anything, going through postpartum depression or things like that. But for the most part, your gut is always going to be right, and follow that. This was an experience, a personal experience for me. When my child was born, my first one, everybody in our baby group talk about, how to put the baby for the nap in the crib or in the bassinet. And here I am. I don't know, after I started moving, maybe after day 10, I was trying to put my child in the bed or the crib to take a nap, and she just wouldn't. She would wake up 5 minutes later. And I was like, seriously, for like a week or two, I was going nuts. And I was like, oh my God, how is everybody else doing it? Like, I just didn't understand it. And then one day, for some reason, like that deep voice inside me talked to me, and I said, Tania, remember that person gave you a carrier? Why don't you try that? And I was like, okay, I found the carrier and I put it on and I put the baby there. And she slept for 3 hours. And I cooked and I vacuumed. And I was like, oh my God, for 2 weeks, I've been trying to just go with what everybody else was doing. And I was clearly not working and I was getting so frustrated. And, uh, then it just happened when I finally listened to myself. And that to me validated, right? What I always say to people, but I had to live this experience. Like for me, not having had babies and being a midwife to having had babies and being a midwife definitely gave me a very different insight of, what I talk about and how I guide and counsel my clients. So just little things like this, just sometimes it's like the family saying something, you should do it this way. It worked for us. You should do it. And this is why sometimes I tell people, like, maybe don't have visitors for the first week and just the two of you figure out, ho- what works for you. That way, that works for you. And then when somebody comes and tells you, do it this way, you're like, this is already working for me. Why would I change it? If it ain't broken, then try to fix it, right? So I think as we support women, we just need to remind them, hey, you have a mind, you have a gut. It's going to talk to you. It is going to. And we just need to trust that. Some people do experience a little bit of issues of trusting themselves after traumatic births. And because we're seeing a lot of these lately, unfortunately, sometimes they do need help. And I think this is why postpartum support is also so helpful. And I think it can manifest in different ways. The support can come from the midwife that is following you at home, the postpartum doula, maybe someone that you or have already kind of like, oh, I've observed her with her other babies and I like her style. So I know this is my to go person if I feel a little lost. So I always tell people, like, before the postpartum is even here, just have a list of who are my people, who's my village, right? That I know I can reach out to them to kind of like remind me, this is how you can do it. This is normal. Try this. What do you think feels, does this make you anxious? Then don't do it, you know? So I think that's how we can really um help people just look at the look at the big picture and not just like drawn in these little things that feels that you don't have a voice, but you actually have. And I
Right.
think with the medical system, the more we continue fighting it, we might hopefully see, and see results. And if it's not so much fighting it, just have a doula. Have a doula really at the hospital,
Someone to
that is going to
advocate.
provide you with all the information that you
Yeah.
need. Right. And I think for doulas also these days need to be very open and be like, hey, this practice, I'm not so sure. I think you should consider maybe a different practice or something because they haven't been very supportive from what I have had previous experiences, or, maybe they were dismissive in the hospital, So I think that's also unfortunately something else that we need to add and in the doulas list of tasks that they need to do. But it's what these days they need to really
They need
provide
to
that kind.
advocate. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. They
Yes.
need to be able to stand up for you when you're not sure what to do next.
Correct.
I
Yes.
agree. You touched a little bit on what someone can do if they don't fully trust themselves for that postpartum period. But I'm curious, even before that, like in pregnancy or when someone gets to a birth and you notice that they're not really trusting themselves, they're a little hesitant, they're really like treading on eggshells. How do you help someone access that internal trust?
I just had someone with that issue, and it was really, really hard because most people eventually, like really open up and tell me what their fear is, what, this person. It took a while, but I think for me, what worked in this case was that she kind of kept shutting me down, like kind of like not listening to me. Like I was trying to be there and I was like, hey, well, your body's telling you this, and not really paying attention to that. But I just kept being there for her. I just kept being there for her. And after the birth, there was a transformation. And I think this is why it's just so important to have that. Well, I like continuity of care. right? So this is what it's always worked for me, to be like a solo practitioner, like it's just me, what you see is what you get. So because I know what that person maybe is going through. We've talked it. I see the changes from visit to visit. And it just allows me to dig deeper, to the point that eventually I told this person, I said, I think you were depressed during your pregnancy. And like she kind of like admitted it, you know. And so I think this is more because it's so hard for somebody who is living through this. I can't trust my body. It's hard for them to see the the light at the end of the tunnel, right? Like they cannot see things objectively. But somebody who is looking from outside can potentially help them see, hey, something is going on. What is it? What is it that has you in this position? And it could be the partner, because, that's the person that is so close related and sees this person every day. It could be a family member, the mom, sister. And if we're really good providers, it will be the provider, the medical provider, always been there providing that care, and or a doula even, right? I once had a doula who actually, this was the doula called me and said, your client is depressed. And it shocked me because I was like, wait, I've been doing the appointments and I didn't realize that. And then when we talked through it, she said, because she always presents to you as, I'm strong, because she wants to show you that she's strong for the birth. She said, but when I have the conversations with her, and I ask very detailed things like, do you have friends? Do you leave your home? It was always a negative. And I was like, it blew my mind. I was like, oh my God, I feel horrible that I missed that, you know? And then I had to go to this person and say, let's talk about this. It shouldn't, this is our concerns, the doula and I. We need to, get to the bottom of this. So then postpartum, you don't experience postpartum depression, or, and I'm glad that the doula was there and was very direct to me and just told me, you're missing on this. And I have no problem accepting that,
Yeah.
because yeah, we're
Well,
not perfect, right? So I think it's just always everybody around this pregnant person always showing up. And I think the pregnant person sometimes needs to be open to hear that. Sometimes people don't want to hear that, I think you're depressed, because it has such a bad stigma, right? It's just like bad connotation. It's stigma. I'm not.
yeah.
I'm not. How could I? I'm strong. So there's also it's another whole topic, right, of conversation. How do we reach to this person when she's a little bit on denial?
Yeah.
And I think the more we talk about it, hopefully normalize it and accept that these things can happen. And sometimes they're not under our control and they don't signify weakness. It just signifies that we are all in a vulnerable space when we're pregnant and we are postpartum.
Yeah. Absolutely. Just talking about postpartum depression, I want to hear your perspective as a professional who has as many years of experience as you do. Um, for whoever's listening, what does postpartum depression look like? How can it be identified? And
Mhm.
do you think that it's avoidable?
So when we talk about, let's talk about what is normal and what is not. So after somebody gives birth, at the end of the first week, their hormones are going to, change and drop the hormones from pregnancy. So there is going to be a normal feeling of, I'm sad, not very motivated. I don't know what I want. I don't know why I feel sad. Like what we call the baby blues, right? And that could extend for a week, maybe even two, where it just kind of like, but it stays there. It doesn't get worse. It just, and then it improves over time. Right? Maybe she starts to take the naps that she had stopped taking. It helps her. Maybe she starts going for walks. It helps her. And then then it just eventually fades away. So that's just what we call baby blues. The postpartum depression is something that doesn't go away and continues and starts to get worse. And it creates this sense of insecurity, anxiety, just thinking that you're not good enough to care for the baby. You don't want to be left alone with the baby. Or maybe the opposite, like nobody else can watch my baby. It's just me who does things perfectly. And, how can we prevent or even just help and recognize that something is happening? If we talk about prevention, we need to address that postpartum is still a vulnerable time for somebody who gives birth. It's still same as the pregnancy was. Once the baby comes, it's not that, oh, it's over. No, it's actually a whole new beginning. And those 6 weeks, if not 8 or 10 or 6 months, you know, that person can still be vulnerable and just feel overwhelmed. And so, like, if especially in the first few weeks, this person doesn't get any rest, it's alone all day with the baby because maybe the husband has to go back to work. And then there's other kids to take care of. If I go to see somebody on the second or third day postpartum visit and she opens the door, I'm like, I don't like this. I don't like this person to open the door for me. Did you open the door for
Sorry.
me?
Yeah, by the second visit, that was me.
Okay. So you were home alone. Yes. So
Yeah, I was.
yeah. So um I want this person to be resting, right? Because rest is so important. Like your body just went through labor, it started going through sleepless nights, right? You need the rest. You can't be cooking lunch for yourself. You can't be waking up 2 days later after the birth to get the kid ready, the toddler ready for school, making sure the lunchbox is packed. Like, no. And so all these things is going to add to that overwhelming sensation of like, I can't do this. I just can't. And no, you shouldn't, you know? One of the things I regret about after having my second child is that I did not have support, that I did not think of getting support after my second child. Because the first time it was easy, it was perfect. And I was like, we have this all figured out. It's going to be easy. But no, you have a toddler that has a schedule and has its things and that. And you're like just trying to wake up and try to figure out still breastfeeding. And the second child was colicky and not sleeping, and it was a mess. And so I remember, to me, it was so difficult that I remember thinking to myself, please do not get postpartum depression. Please don't get depressed. Thinking that it was something I can control. Right. So if this person is not getting the proper rest, nutrition, even daylight, right? Sometimes we're like in the dark. It's gonna probably make us more prone to having these mood disorders. If somebody already has a depressive diagnosis, anxiety diagnosis, probably needs to make sure they're taking their medication, that it's adjusted based on, how this person is feeling. And for a number of patients, it's going to be necessary that they are on medication. And as much as we feel like I don't want to take anything, I'm very holistic, I'll do therapy. Maybe therapy helps people. But we also have this stigma that I don't want to be taking medication because, again, it makes me feel like go to psychiatry is like, no way, right? But also, people have experienced that after taking the medication, they feel so much better, right? Like, so much better. And they're able to see things the way they couldn't see them before. They just couldn't. And it's still compatible with breastfeeding. They don't have to stop if they have to go on medication. So that's also great. So, again, we need to make sure this person has a support system, especially the partners, the husbands. I know sometimes we cannot control much paternity leave but if the person is able to stick around for days to take care of the meals, take care, it's going to be hard, but they should be there to just really offer that support.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Along those lines, do you think that it's avoidable by creating that village and getting sunlight and having someone else be taking care of your nutrition for a little while and, putting all those things into place?
I think it's possible that it can be avoided. It definitely is. And one thing I would add is also if the person had a traumatic birth experience, it is going to put them at a higher risk. But if this person is able to talk to someone and process this experience and not just feel like, well, birth is difficult, birth is traumatic. Thankfully, you have a healthy baby. That's not support. That's not
Yeah.
supporting
No.
this person in their journey. That is just making them hide their feelings and emotions. And that is just going to actually trigger something later on. So I think, yes, if we do have a good support system, we can prevent it. Like I said, it's not going to do it 100% because there's people that are still going to be prone to it. Uh, but I think it's definitely a good first step
Yeah.
to prevent it, to avoid it.
Yeah. Guys, you heard it here first. Create your village. Reach out to your friends. Tell them you need help.
Correct.
Yeah. It's it's such important information. Thank you so much for sharing all that. To end on a slightly lighter note than postpartum depression, I would love to hear if you want to share, like, just in short or very quickly, like the ways that having a home birth and having these experiences, especially the positive experiences, can shape how women show up in their life and in motherhood afterwards.
I think by being at home, you definitely have higher chances of being heard, being able to create a birth plan, like a real one that gets listened, gets read, gets discussed, gets understood by your provider. And therefore, that is going to create a good birth experience. Remember, we're sitting down for hours every appointment, right, to discuss all these things. And it almost becomes, we kind of get into like a familiar level, right? Like, how's your husband? Right? So by creating this relationship, you can guarantee that uh, the birth is going to be a satisfactory experience that is also going to make you feel, and sometimes this is a problem. They feel so well postpartum that they want to start vacuuming the apartment on day 3. Was that you? No.
It was. It very much was.
Yeah. So it's like,
But this,
they feel so
yeah,
good and they're like, oh my God, I have all this energy. And people tell me that after my first birth in the hospital, I look like crap. And now I'm like, you know, now I'm like,
yeah,
I feel
no.
so good. Uh,
It felt so good. And I remember the first, especially after my first baby was born, I felt so great and I was doing too much. And I remember when you came for the appointment, I don't remember if it was a 2-day appointment or a week, but you were like, no, you're doing too much. You had a tear. You cannot be the stairs. And I remember you telling me, like, slow down. Like, you need to sleep more. You need to let everyone around you take care of you. Uh, and I remember just like by the second time, I just was able to take it so much slower and like learn from the first experience. And I was very grateful for that because I did take it slower at the end and it was so much easier to recover because I was able to take it slowly.
yeah. And so I think, all that has to do with having a good experience and feeling that you were really connected with your body. No, not somebody else telling you do it like this or do it like that, or oh, it's time for you to push. You need to push now. But for you to feel like, wow, I really was able to listen to my body, right? And that was ultimately, I think, what I personally want for my clients. And also for them to feel good postpartum. I'm potentially avoid any mood disorders in the postpartum period.
Thank you so much for saying request. I feel so grateful to Tanya for sharing these stories of trust and choice. And I hope this conversation reminds you that you are strong, you are capable, and you have the space to make decisions that feel right for you. These experiences of being guided and being supported and trusted ripple so far beyond birth. They really shape how we parent, how we move through life, and how we hold ourselves, and how we hold each other. I hope as you finish your tea and settle into the evening that you feel grounded, seen, and lightly inspired, that you feel the reassurance that your own body and your own intuition and your own choices are valid, and that you can carry that calm, centered energy forward into your life and your motherhood. And if you're currently pregnant, into your birth. Thank you so much for spending this time with us. If this conversation stayed with you, consider sharing it with another mom who might need it too. Until next time, trust your intuition, move gently, and take care of yourself. Good night, mamas.